First off, I want to make something clear. I am actually genuinely enjoying Beyon Light. I feel like it's a pretty good expansion. The story is very good. The Stasis supers are very fun. Granted, could be a little bit broken in certain areas, but enjoyable. And the Europa, the patrol zone, is amazing. I feel like it's a really cool patrol zone. With that being said, one of the biggest concerns was more aligns the biggest of concerns that we would ever want to have when it comes to a looter shooter, which is having the 90% of the game that we play be very lackluster or just limiting on reasons to do the 90% of the stuff that we normally do in Destiny. Like, there's no real reason to go out there and do so-and-so activity and get stuff other than maybe increase your power level, and that's really it. That was my biggest concern, and I talked about it in my Chibi Hour. Now that we have the expansion, my concerns are very, very true, and I'm hoping, to be honest with what I'm seeing, that this is something that will be fixed over time, that Bungie is holding back on a lot of stuff being shown in the database, the collections and such of weapons and so on. And on top of this, the maps and modes and new activities and strikes and so on that normally would come out at day one with this expansion is more aligned spread out throughout the year to be released in seasons. And that's kind of why we're not seeing anything new for PvP or Gambit or really with strikes as well, other than the one new strike and a returning strike from Destiny 1. In the database right now, there is essentially 30 weapons. That does include the adept weapons and also includes at least one weapon that was originally back in Destiny 2 Vanilla that will be brought back with random rolls and new rolls to it to make it somewhat new. Now, with that being said, there is a lot of issue with this because there is no vendor refresh. Crucible, Gambit, and Vanguard have no new weapons. Again, another reason why you don't want to turn in tokens. They already made the nerf to the power leveling equalizing thing that most people did with turning in tokens, which was essentially, in my opinion, the only reason why I spent tokens when it comes to these vendors. Now that they removed it and there's no vendor refresh, there is no reason to really turning in tokens at all. And that's disappointing. I really am wondering what's going on because now it's been, I don't even know how many years since we actually had a general vendor refresh where there's a whole list of new weapons. So when you do these activities for the 50th, 100th, 1000th time for a grind to prep for a raid or be able to do the raid down the road and do your power leveling, you're also getting interesting things to play around with that are new weapons and new armor that looks very interesting. And don't even get me started on the design choice for the armor. Essentially copy and paste to all three vendors with a different design that's tied to that mode with not really much imagination, in my opinion, towards the armor. Not really complain too much because at least we have new armor as a vendor refresh, but other than that, it's disappointing to see that there's no new weapons. This is a year expansion. This is supposed to be the foundation of content that we will mainly be messing with throughout the year, while the seasons are more lines of trickles of extra stuff to keep our attention if certain other things aren't really doing the attention grabbing in the meantime. And I know that we have a new season right around the corner, so there could be more additions of loot to be had, but yeah, this doesn't just go to just loot. I mean, if you really look at strikes, it's still the same thing, except in my opinion, has gotten more tedious due to there being less strikes, So a higher chance of either you getting the same strike over and over in a row, or you get a strike that you personally don't really want to do. And there's no incentive change to the strikes. When you limit the amount of strikes, I kind of assumed that that would mean strike exclusives will be put into the strike playlist, where we use skeleton keys like in Destiny 1 and chance on getting some sweet new stuff that is specifically for so-and-so strike, giving a reason of freshness or whatever to strikes to want you to go and play the Vanguard strike playlist. And not only that, maybe making the strike playlist a little bit more difficult and at the same time fun. I talked about this with modifiers. Modifiers have been technically the same this whole time. Now, don't get me wrong, I noticed that there was one new perk, technically a modifier, where we get stasis damage increase. It's not a burn, it's just an extra buff in the middle and of the 3 mods that we get, the modifiers. And that's great and all, but I really do feel like the strike playlist is very, very boring for what it is, and it could be a lot more fleshed out just by my idea of modifiers, where we take things from even Destiny 1 and put it into Destiny 2, and then add some freshness of brand new modifiers that make it either difficult or fun or both. I talked about how Blackout before the nerf was really hilariously awesome to deal with when you did the Lake of Shadow strike, making the strike very different because if you got booped by a wall, you instantly died. But Bungie decided to nerf that because it was a little overkill in their opinion, when I just kind of thought that it added some variety to the strike playlist in an interesting way. I really don't know. But that's just Vanguard strikes. Gambit, if you play Gambit, I really just don't understand what's going on with that, to the point where I feel like Gambit shouldn't even be in the game if this is the attention that it's getting. They took Gambit Prime and Gambit and basically turned it in its own mode. It's one true, this is what it is now. And yet, a lot of the things that they implemented or tweaked doesn't really feel enough to make Gambit a better experience still. And the fact that they ruined the whole cool depth of having roles, which I thought was a cool idea for Gambit, and just threw them out the window instead of making some kind of way when you start a match, instead of having to go for the armor, you just kind of choose which role you want. Almost like selecting a character in Overwatch, but in this case, you're selecting if you want to be one of the, like an invader or something like that, or a sentry in Gambit. And then Crucible, there's no maps, there's no new modes, and they've compacted the modes a bit more to make matchmaking obviously a little bit better. That's what they said. But again, not much depth there either. These are things that we're going to be playing a lot. And I know that people are going to say there's new exotics to play around with in these modes. But again, only 30-something weapons is not really going to make these experiences that don't have much change to them, or, like I said, many times, breath of fresh air of going into, to where these weapons would just completely have these things not be existent of a problem. I know we have the raid coming out, and there are weapons in the database that already show the raid weapons, and that is great. And I'm excited to play around with these weapons. We have new perks to play with. But again, the main thing that is now worrying me is that there was almost no focus on the big stuff that we focus on Destiny, which is the 90% of what we do is the grind, the power leveling, to going for god rolls, etc. There's not enough to go around, and I did say that sunsetting would cause grind fatigue, where people would get annoyed on trying to get certain rolls of weapons, and maybe they limited the amount of stuff that you grind for, so then you don't get that, but that's not the way of doing it. And I probably will do a separate video on explaining how they could stop anyone from having any kind of grind fatigue, knowing that there's an expiration date to the things that they're grinding for and may have got RNG, screwing them over, and that's limiting them from wanting to do that activity anymore due to them having poor RNG, and on top of that, knowing that this is going to have an expiration date within the next year of first being released, and who knows when they'll finally get the weapon to drop the way that they want it to. This is more Alliance talking about an issue that will probably start showing up within a few months or even sooner. Season of the Hunt may bring some freshness, and I do hope it does, but I don't know if it's going to bring enough if we're not going to look at the other things that aren't getting a giant overhaul, or at least in this case, even just a small facelift. Vanguard Strikes as a prime example. Just adding modifiers, making it a little bit more difficult and fun like Destiny 1 Strikes. Not a little facelift with that either. Everything's essentially the same when it comes to the endgame grind. And Europa, the only real thing that is to do in there is essentially the hunts for the barons of the DLC. I think that's considered a powerful, but Variks does have a powerful, but there's not really too much beyond that I was expecting, like a Dreaming City thing. Looking at the feedback of Dreaming City, where there was multiple things that you could do that would give you high tier loot, and on top of that had a giant loot pool of weapons to go for that were not just tied to the raid in the Dreaming City. I don't know. I do understand that they do not have the manpower that they originally had when it came to Destiny 2 Forsaken. There's all these developers that are working at home, and I understand what's going on in the world. $50 though, of an expansion with, on top of this, the seasons that maybe will bring more. But I really don't think seasons are going to essentially bring enough, but I don't know, because basically with how lacking on the end game stuff that Beyon Light really has outside the raid that's going to be coming out, I worry about the seasons, because the seasons would have to essentially have more than Beyon Light has when it comes to repeatable stuff. And I don't know, that would be crazy, flipping almost the roles of what's going to have the most stuff that the end game people are looking to do, or the people that are playing the game a lot to do the constant repeats of PvP matches and such, focused in the seasons, when the expansion's more focused on the people that want a story and a new raid, and then everything else will be focused throughout the year. I don't know if that would be the thing, but that's the only thing I can really think of to fix the problem. But yes, $50, I'm not going to lie, is maybe they shouldn't have priced it that way. That doesn't include the fact that there's obviously going to be a lot of Eververse items, including in these, and I love to use the big quotes, free events, where there's a giant emphasis on, hey, look at all these cool cosmetics in the Eververse store, and go do this tedious thing where you turn in a bunch of treats to vendors in Dawning, rather than us implement some kind of fun new mode, like a Haunted Forest-esque mode, to make Dawning a little bit more interesting. I don't know. And that's my biggest concern when it comes to Destiny right now. It's not based on simply the expansion being good, because it is good. It's what I know is going to happen if this is not answered within the few weeks even, and we see it being answered or changed, where for the season to add more content that when it comes to weapons and armor to go for, and activities and modes and maps to core activities. Bungie, I'm not gonna lie, keep doing great work with your stories and expansions. I'm not saying lose focus on that and then just focus the endgame stuff. But there was almost, it feels like, no attention to anything that's core playlist or things that already are in the game that probably could see some facelift or giant overhauls. Maybe take a giant change of the flashpoint powerful, which I've noticed is pretty much kind of gone, I think. Unless that's what the Europa Variks thing was replacing. But maybe making flashpoints on patrol zones have modifiers and make them a little bit more difficult to do and traverse to make things a little bit more new feeling when it's just modifiers or something in a patrol zone, a whole patrol area. I don't know. I'm not a developer. I don't know what they've been dealing with, but I do understand that I'm looking at a lot of feedback already from some people that notice this as a problem, and they're not really happy with the price tag of the expansion with the season pass thing if this is what we got. And the season pass, if it's like last year or even the year before, and that's their redeeming quality of, well, it'll get better with the seasons, even if it were to be like the past ones, it's still not enough, because those need to be more to keep up with what's missing with Beyon Light. That's essentially what I'm saying. Don't get upset with me. I'm still going to play the game. Don't think I'm a hater or anything. I'm just saying how it is, because people are going to, who personally don't play Destiny all the time and can have a happy tone about Destiny beyond the problems and whatever. This is going to affect the mass majority that don't really play Destiny as much in the sense of where they want to all the time to get nothing. If they're not getting anything, if they don't feel like the game is fleshed out with new stuff in the core playlists and new feelings with the core playlists, and there's new maps and whatever, they're going to leave. There's going to be a lot of fatigue in those players, and you don't want that to happen. This is not more lines of saying Bungie sucks. More lines of Bungie, know this, understand this, so then this does not happen. So I don't know. That's just my opinion, and it is a big problem. I want to know your thoughts, though, in the comments down below. If I'm being a little bit crazy about what I'm saying, like, oh, I'm over-exaggerating, you can let me know, explain. But if you agree with me, explain that too. Either way, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a Chibi-tastic day, morning, evening, wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next Chibi video. Chibi out.